Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Authentic discussions with interesting people about railway subjects that matter.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Railway Conversations with Doc Frank. I'm Doc Frank, your host of this podcast, and today's episode is a special one. It's not really a conversation between two people or three as all the previous episodes. This is more a conversation with myself on the basis of frequently asked questions. I'm in the process of issuing two new training courses, not just one, but two. And they are both about the topic of high capacity, not just for signaling, but for the entire railway organization. If a railway wants to bring its operations to higher capacity than what was possible in the past. So in regards to that, there are a number of very interesting questions regarding who needs to know about high capacity and high capacity signaling, and how can people learn about it? How can we get them educated? And so on. So I think this is really something that's of interest for a wider audience, regardless whether you intend to ever attend one of my training courses or not. So this is not a sales pitch, but it does tell you about the reasoning behind those trainings, the approaches, and maybe if you are interested, then obviously I wouldn't push you away. So I hope you take something out of this, irrespective of what you're doing in the future. And as usual, please enjoy. Hi, it's Doc Frank again, real quick before you head off. If you are a fan of communications-based train control or short CBTC, there's an event coming up in September that you absolutely don't want to miss. It's the first virtual global CBTC conference. It's called CBTC World Summit 2023, and it's happening on the 20th and the 21st of September. There will be 3 sessions of about 6 hours duration each for 3 different global regions, one for Asia Pacific, one's for North and South America, and one's for Europe and the Middle East. So wherever you are in the world, one of those sessions will be during the daytime in your time zone, and you can watch it live for the full 6 hours with 6 presentations. The kicker about this is that all other presentations, including the ones from your own session, will be available for replay via recordings. So that means that if the other session should be in the middle of your night, you can still watch it on demand at a time that's more convenient for you and doesn't interfere with your good night's sleep. The conference is available for registration right now at my training portal under docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I'm putting a lot of effort into this conference. It will be an absolute blockbuster event, and I very much hope to see you there. Until then, keep it simple and bye for now. What is high-capacity signaling and why is it important to you? Well, to answer this question, I would first and foremost talk about how most railways still work today with regards to signaling. Most railways have something that I would call conventional signaling. Some people also call it fixed block signaling. So that's the classic signaling system that you would know for railways, where you have your signals in these days most often with lights sitting on a mast. On top of a mast, you have your point machines where trains can go from one direction to the other. And then importantly, that's why it's called fixed block signaling. The railway line is divided into so-called block sections. And they are divided into those sections by either track circuits or axle counters. And those devices detect whether a train is in a certain section of track or whether that section of track is free. The problem with those conventional fixed block signaling systems is that they have a capacity limit. These blocks can only make this short because they need to reflect the braking distance of the trains. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's fair to say that there's a practical capacity limit to these kinds of signaling systems, which is usually around 20 trains per hour. Now, high capacity signaling on the other side is anything that's using modern technology to increase the capacity of a railway line over and above those limits of a conventional signaling system. So why is it important to me? Ever since I entered my career in signaling, which is more than 30 years ago, I kind of suffered of the fact that signaling in most cases is a constraint. It's a hard limit for higher capacity. And interestingly, I worked in mainline railways for the first part of my career, and it actually took me 18 years of my career until I got the first time an exposure to communications-based train control, or CBTC, one of the foremost technologies for high-capacity signaling. And suddenly I realized, wow, there are technologies out there that can actually boost the capacity of a signaling system. Now, call me naive, it just took me a while to get out of my mainline rail bubble and realize that in the metro world there are systems that can actually boost the capacity of the railway system. So, and a few years later, then another mainstream signaling technology, ETCS, the European Train Control System, started to come up with some additional features that could also help increasing the signaling capacity and would therefore qualify as high capacity signaling. And I thought, well, one, this is fantastic because now we finally have some kind of technology for mainline railways too to increase their capacity. And then I thought that high capacity signaling would be a nice overarching term, if you will, to combine those technologies and also other technologies that you may have in certain countries for increasing capacity. So it's important to me because there are many railways, especially in cities, that are reaching their capacity limits for conventional signaling and that really require some form of high capacity signaling to prepare themselves for the future, for further growth, for further growing demand in patronage or ridership. And it's important for those cities and for the mobility in those cities, especially or including the major cities here in Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth, that high capacity signaling is introduced. And it is being introduced in all four of those cities, which makes it exciting from my perspective as a specialist in this area. Who needs to know about high capacity signaling? Who needs to know about high capacity signaling? That's a very good question. And I think that will be interesting for a lot of the listeners of this podcast, because I think that there will be a major change in the railway industry with regards to who needs to know about signaling. See, in the old world of conventional fixed block signaling, there was the signaling department, a group of signaling engineers, and they did everything to do with signaling, and that was fine. And it was equally fine that pretty much nobody else in the railway organization needed to know about signaling, because the signaling guys took care of this, right? Now, I believe in this new world, if you will, of high capacity signaling, this does no longer work, because it's not enough to just let the signaling engineers introduce some new form of signaling technology and then the capacity of the entire railway will magically increase. This is not how it works. So for a railway to really come to a higher capacity operation and train service, the entire organization needs to grow. The entire organization needs to transform. And that also means that more people in the railway organization need to know at least some basics, some fundamentals of the enabling technology for this higher capacity. And that's high capacity signaling. So I believe in the future, many more people, most of which have never ever needed to know about signaling, they will now have to start knowing and learning about high capacity signaling. Not just the old signaling, that's basically, you can almost forget about this. You may need to know a little bit for understanding the principles, like what is a block, what's a fixed block, things like that. But importantly, it's the new advanced, sophisticated, high capacity signaling that those people need to understand. How do you make sure that this training is suitable for anyone? I think, and I've been thinking this all my career in the development and delivery of trainings, I think if you want to teach signaling, especially advanced signaling like CBTC, ETCS, high capacity signaling, automatic train control, if you want to teach this to what I call non-signaling people, which basically means railway professionals that only have a little or maybe even no prior signaling knowledge, the most important thing to do that is having the right intention. So when I develop my training courses, I try to put myself in the shoes of the non-signaling people and say, well, how can I explain this to someone who doesn't know a thing about signaling? And I think this is a real differentiator between the training that I'm doing and the training that everybody else is doing out there. I mean, for one, there are hardly any trainings in this area at all. The number of CBTC trainings in the world that are available for the public is pretty limited worldwide, astonishingly. The same for ETCS and high capacity signaling training. There is nothing. There's nothing in the world apart from the one that I'm doing now. So I'm kind of a pioneer in this field. And I think I'm also pioneering in this field of making advanced signaling understandable for normal railway people, for normal railway professionals that are not already signaling specialists. There are some signaling trainings out there, like basics for beginners, something like this. Yeah, okay, but these signaling trainings are the basics. Like really the basics, like what is a signal, what is a block section, how do we separate trains, and so on. So none of these trainings for beginners would ever dare touching advanced topics such as CBTC and ETCS, because most people think, oh, well, this is just too complicated for them. You cannot teach this to a beginner. And I disagree. And I've proven this in my previous trainings. I've done CBTC training since 2014. And I've had hundreds of people from all kinds of careers in the railway industry running through this training program, even people who never worked in railways, and they all got it. They all understood it 100%. And that demonstrates and proves that this kind of training that I'm developing and delivering does work for non-signaling people. And this is extremely important right now because, as I said, more and more people from across the entire railway industry need to start learning about these modern signaling technologies. What is the content of this training for high-capacity signaling? This new training, which I call High-Capacity Signaling Blueprint, is really special. I thought about this quite intensely, and I took a case study here in Australia from Melbourne to basically get myself inspired for this training. Because what's happening in Melbourne now, for the last 10 years, they had a signaling strategy which was based on CBTC. And for reasons that go beyond the content of this podcast here, it didn't work. So they came to the point where they said, well, we can't really roll out CBTC across the entire network as we wanted to do it initially. We need to come up with something else. So they are now redeveloping their signaling strategy for high capacity signaling. They actually use this term in Melbourne, and now they want to base it on ETCS. And that's where I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. There will be plenty of people in Melbourne that need to know, firstly, what is high capacity signaling. So getting some definitions around capacity, around high capacity. For the signaling beginners, you may even have to explain the very basics, like what is signaling in the first place. And only then you can come to, okay, what does capacity mean and what does high capacity mean? Then we need to look at both technologies, CBTC and ETCS. And then we need to think about in this training, and we need to discuss in this training, explain what can you do to apply CBTC or ETCS in a way that really gets you to a high capacity outcome. Because one of the things, circling back to Melbourne, one of the things that was pretty obvious there over time is that in certain conditions, in certain operational conditions, CBTC does not really lead to higher capacity. At least not much higher capacity. It's pretty much the same as it was for the previous conventional signaling system. So people say, understandably, why would we spend a lot of money for CBTC technology if the main purpose of it, getting higher capacity, is not there? We don't get this. Maybe because simply our application is not suitable for it, which in fact is the main reason in Melbourne. So it's important to explain in this training as well, how do you really get to a high capacity outcome? Not just saying, well, we introduce the technology and then everything will be fine, but actually applying that technology in a way that really leads to higher capacity. And the content of this training is accordingly. So there are 4 modules. Module 1 explains the basic, like what is high capacity signaling, what is capacity, what does high mean, what are the limitations of the old conventional fixed block signaling system, and how can those constraints be overcome by high capacity signaling. Then module number 2, we're looking at CBTC and what CBTC technology provides for high capacity signaling. In module number 3, we're looking at ETCS and what can be done to make ETCS suitable for high capacity signaling, which is not quite as straightforward as for CBTC, but it's still doable. And it's proven elsewhere that it can be done. It has been done before. So we're not talking pie in the skies or maybes. We're talking about real things that have already happened elsewhere in the world and led to ETCS applications that provide higher capacity. And then module number 4 is the blueprint, if you will. How can those technologies be applied? How do they have to be applied if you really want to get a high capacity outcome? Why do you combine CBTC and ETCS in one training? Isn't it either or? Well, eventually, once a railway has decided what the strategy is for high capacity signaling, then yes, it will be either or. It will be either CBTC or ETCS. It's very rare that a railway really applies both of those technologies at the same time. If I say very rare, it's almost non-existent. However, what I mentioned before when we started off this discussion here is that there are a lot of similarities between CBTC and ETCS when it comes to high capacity signaling. So it's worth to compare both technologies and what they can do, how they can come to high capacity signaling. And one of the reasons for that is if you try to beef up ETCS for higher capacity, what you're actually trying to do is making ETCS look and behave more like CBTC. Because CBTC, if you will, is the gold standard for high capacity signaling. And if you can make ETCS look and behave a bit more like CBTC, then you're lifting it up for higher capacity. So there are some railways out there who have to decide. I wouldn't say they sit on the fence. Eventually they will make a decision, but who need to decide between CBTC and ETCS, because both technologies would actually be suitable. And the trick is to find out which of those technologies is more suitable. I have been involved in 3 developments of signaling strategies in 3 different cities, in Sydney, in Perth, where I live, and also in Wellington, New Zealand. And in all 3 cases, it was a technology comparison between ETCS and CBTC. So maybe it's a special case that the suburban railways that we have in our cities here are somewhat hybrids between mainline railways and metro railways. So the metro aspect is the higher capacity that's needed in the cities, and the mainline aspect is a bit the pedigree where those railways came from. But in either case, you need to look at both technologies, you need to compare them, you need to make a decision which of those 2 technologies is more suitable. And we have seen case studies in Australia where different cities came to different results. Like Sydney and Brisbane, for example, they are going for advanced varieties of ETCS for their high capacity signaling. Perth, on the other hand, goes for CBTC. And the railway networks are comparable. So Melbourne wanted to go for CBTC first, and now they're swapping to ETCS. But they still have a line fitted with CBTC, or part of the line fitted with CBTC going into the future. And there may be other lines in the future where they decide, well, this is something where we can still go for CBTC because we really want the very high capacity. Whereas for the rest of the network, we're doing ETCS. So you can see it does make sense to cover CBTC and ETCS in the same training if you do it purposely for comparison, for coming up with the common denominators and then looking at both technologies, how they can be applied for higher capacity. Another thing I wanted to mention is that for a while, I worked on the ETCS introduction in Sydney, the introduction for ETCS level 2, that is the digital systems program. And I was responsible for lessons learned, for developing a framework of lessons learned for this program. Now, when I started looking at comparable projects around the world, I really struggled with the fact that there weren't that many ETCS projects out there that really aim for an uplift in capacity. At the time back then when I did this was before COVID, there was the Thameslink project in London, but that was pretty much it. So in order to develop a wider database of projects to learn from for this lessons learned framework, I needed to look at other projects where they try to increase the capacity with signaling. What was that? CBTC projects, of course. So you're looking at CBTC and ETCS projects alike, looking for some common patterns for increasing the signaling capacity and also transforming the railway organization for higher capacity and higher performance. So that's another area where you can see that it does make a lot of sense in one training about high capacity signaling to look at both CBTC and ETCS technologies. And I'm absolutely convinced that even somebody from an organization that says, we are using ETCS, they will learn something of value from the CBTC module. because it will give them ideas, it will give them inspiration that they can take over into their ETCS application and make it look a bit more like CBTC. What do you mean by blueprint? Is there a systematic formula for high capacity signaling? That's a good question. I really thought long and hard about the title of this training course. And then I came up with blueprint because I heard it before. I once did a training myself outside the railways where the term blueprint was used. Now, what is a blueprint? It sounds almost like a recipe. And, to some extent, it really is. Because what I found when I did all these lessons learned for Sydney and doing my own research, developing the training courses, first for CBTC, later for ETCS, then for more advanced forms of ETCS that can get to an increase in capacity, very often that just starts making the business case, a sensible business case for ETCS. And then realizing that there are common denominators and introducing those technologies and transforming a railway from conventional signaling to a more advanced form of high capacity signaling, there are a lot of commonalities between CBTC and ETCS. And I really do believe that there is some kind of recipe, a series of steps, if you will, of tasks that you need to do or that you should be doing to maximize your chances of success. Success means that you're introducing this new technology, be it CBTC or be it some enhanced ETCS, and the outcome will really give you a higher capacity, because this is what you do it for, right? This is the whole purpose of introducing this new technology. So if you have certain steps in a certain order, that if you go through those steps and you actually do what will be taught in this training in module number 4, then you will set yourself up in a better way for a higher chance of getting to a high capacity signaling outcome. And of course, the flip side is equally true. So if you are missing those steps, if you're ignoring those steps, if you say, no, I want to do it differently. I've got a clear vision how I want to do it, and this is very different from what Frank's telling you in this training course. Then that's fine. You can do that, but you just need to know that if you did it in a different way, there may be a different outcome. And if you did know that outcome in advance, then maybe you would make a different decision. Maybe you would say, if that's the likely outcome, that's not really what I want, because I do want high capacity. And if I compromise it by doing it like this, maybe I'd rather do it the other way. And that's the blueprint aspect. And I think it really gives the students of this training a series of steps and a series of topics to think about and to take on board that may be extremely helpful for the implementation of high capacity signaling. And I dare say, if this is implemented correctly, and of course I can't take a guarantee for somebody screwing things up in the implementation process, but if applied correctly, this could save a railway years of implementation time and millions of dollars in implementation cost compared to what's happening if things are going wrong, if things are going sideways, pear-shaped, whatever you want to call it. How can people access this training? And are there any limitations? This training was launched in a live format in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. And the main thing there was because, one, I thought it would be very relevant for Melbourne, but apparently the timing wasn't perfect. And secondly, I wanted to get some live on-the-spot feedback on the training, which I can then use to make it even better. refine it, fine tune it. And I now have done an online version of this training, High Capacity Signaling Blueprint. And this will be launched tomorrow. So if you listen to this podcast when it comes out, which is Thursday, the 6th of July, tomorrow, Friday, the 7th, this training will be launched as an online training on my portal, on my training portal, which is docfranktraining.podia.com. So if you put this into your web browser, it would come up straight away. And then in the top menu, you have an item courses. You go in there and there you will find the high capacity signaling blueprint, the online training as of Friday morning Perth time, which may be later in the morning on the Australian East Coast, even further in the morning in New Zealand. And if you happen to live in Europe or America, somewhere else, it will just come later because you're in a different time zone. So with regards to limitations, no, there aren't really any. And that's the cool thing about this online training, because it can be consumed by anyone, anywhere in the world. These trainings, the lessons are all recorded. There are videos, and they can be viewed on demand and anytime, regardless of time zones, regarding where in the world you are, regardless whether you prefer sitting in an armchair in your living room, or whether you've got a home office, or whether you take some time off at work for training purposes. You can watch this anywhere you like and how often you like. And so there are no limitations from this perspective. And I also mentioned before that this training is suitable for anyone in the railway industry, and even for people from outside the industry who think about coming into the railway industry. Signaling people will learn a lot, even experienced signaling people. I've had this before, that I had people with like 10 or 20 years of CBTC experience. They did my training and said, well, I wish I would have had this training several years earlier, because I could have avoided a lot of mistakes that I have seen happening in my projects where I worked on for implementing CBTC. So signaling people will take something away, will learn something of value. Non-signaling people, wow, heaps. And a whole new world's opening up, that may be the very first signaling training ever that people can really understand, where previously they may have thought, well, signaling is just too difficult for me, or I'm too stupid for it, whatever people think. But then suddenly they say, wow, a signaling training that I can understand. And it's even a signaling training on advanced topics such as high capacity signaling. So no, there are no limitations. And the only thing you do know, or you do need for this training, is curiosity and an open mind. And then, of course, the determination to actually sit down and go through the training. I mean, if you don't take the lessons, then you're not going to learn. I can't help you with this. But other than that, I'm really trying hard to support people. Part of the training that I haven't mentioned before is an online community, what I call a study group, where people can network with others who take the same training. And in this group, they can also post their questions that they have on the training course. And I will go in there into this group myself, answering those questions. So there, despite this being an online training, there will be some possibility for interaction and for getting questions answered, which I think is very important. Another thing that I'm offering, which I believe is pretty unique in the signaling training industry, is a guaranteed minimum of 12 months support after the training. Support means I will shift you, once you completed your training, I will shift you into an alumni community where you have an even wider network with people who have done previously my CBTC, ETCS, or high capacity signaling trainings. And you can keep asking questions and getting those questions answered by me for a guaranteed minimum of 12 months. I mean, there are people who have done my trainings like 8-9 years ago, and they can still ask me questions today. I just don't want to commit for years and years and years if I don't really know what's happening in the future, but the 12 months of after event support will be guaranteed. And what I've found in the past is that I'm treating my students that have done my training courses almost like mentees. So it's really a mentorship relationship almost, where people keep staying in touch with me, asking me questions about the topic of the training, sometimes about some career considerations, what have you. And if I'm happy to answer that, as long as it doesn't drift into unpaid consultancy, that's fine. Yeah. So related to the training courses, I'm very, very open to support you long term on your journey towards high capacity signaling. And I think it's a pretty good offer. And everybody who's been on one of my trainings tends to agree with that. What is next for you in training research? The next frontier, if you will, for research is something that revolves around mindset. You know, I've been trying for the last few years to stay at the forefront of the research, if you will, in my field. That's why I'm focusing on advanced signaling technologies such as CBTC and ETCS in my trainings and also in my consulting practice. This is why I've now developed this new course, High Capacity Signaling Blueprint, where I bring those technologies together and really explain how they can be pushed to really deliver higher signaling capacity. And I focused in those trainings, I focused a lot on two things. One, a general understanding of the technology, and two, application aspects. So how to apply this technology, what you should do, what you should not do in order to get the best possible outcome. Now, the next step in research, which I'm just diving into as we speak, is what happens, or why is it that some projects look very neat from the outside? They are well planned, they are well executed, and they're still not successful. So why is that? What's going on there? And I think it really comes down to mindset. So what I have identified in my years of practice in consulting and the years of discussing with my training participants, with my students, is that in most cases where there are obstacles in the way of being successful, it's related to mindset. It's related to an old way of thinking that was perfectly okay in the past for conventional fixed block signaling and the way how a railway as at large operated under conventional fixed block signaling, but it's no longer okay for the new world of high capacity signaling. So if you treat that new technology in the same way that you've treated the old technology, the outcome will very likely be like it was before. So you can actually compromise the benefits of the new technology by an outdated way of thinking. Because an outdated way of thinking, outdated means doesn't fit to the new technology, also leads to an outdated way of acting. And then you're making decisions and you implement the new technology in a certain way that somehow resembles the old ways of doing things, and often enough also with the old capacity limitations that you wanted to get rid of. So mindset, I believe, is the next frontier, and that's really something that I want to dive in and do some research on and also do some training on. Now, having said this, the whole thing really got some booster rockets on when I was at the core conference a couple of weeks ago in Melbourne. And this is because I've spoken to so many people from different railways, from different jurisdictions, and everybody said, hey, the main problem that we have is not the technology so much. The main problem we have is the mindset. The main problem we have, not everybody calls it mindset, but somebody called it business transformation. Somebody called it the transition from the old to the new. So there are different terms out there depending on people's vocabulary and what the official narrative is. But it all comes back to the mindset. It all comes back to people's way of thinking. And I thought this is really urgent. This is something that needs to be addressed immediately. So what I'm doing now is I am developing a new training where I basically built the plane while already flying. So it will start next month on the 1st of August. It's a training which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset. So not just high capacity signaling, it's high capacity railway, because it's really about lifting the entire organization up. Importantly, including everything outside the signaling department. And what I will do in this training is I will provide a series of training modules every month. So on the 1st of every month, starting on the 1st of August, there will be a new training module. And in this new training module, I'm doing some kind of coaching on the whole thing of mindset. So I'm doing a quite general research on mindset and how to change from the old to something new. And so that will be part of the training. But what I'm also going to do is, from my own experience in training and consulting, I will come up every month with 5 examples of an old mindset that's no longer suitable for high capacity signaling or for a high capacity railway. For each and every one of those examples, I will come up with an associated new mindset. So what you can replace the old one with. And I will also look at a way to come from the old to the new. So I'm doing this for 5 examples every month for 12 months. So that's 60 of those examples in total, 60. And the whole thing is pretty inexpensive, because I really want to attract big masses of people there, because I think pretty much anyone working on a railway which transitions to high capacity signaling or to higher capacity of the entire railway operation needs to know about this. So I didn't want the money to stand in the way. So this is a very inexpensive course. Each one of those examples to go from an old to a new mindset cost you $10, which is, to me, it's next to being it for free. The only reason I'm not doing it for free is that, one, I need to earn a living from this. And then secondly, of course, what I find in my training practice is who doesn't pay attention. So some kind of nominal payment is really, really helpful for people to commit themselves and then take the content more seriously, because they paid something for it and now they want to get some value back. And that's exactly what I want, because I want to give them the value and I want them to take this value on board and learn something. So that training is called High Capacity Railway Mindset. It's already on my training portal. So if you go on the same portal, docfranktraining.podia.com, and you look under courses, not only will you see there the high capacity signaling blueprint as of Friday morning, 7th of July, 7/7, you will also see there already the high capacity railway mindset training. And if you sign up for this before the training officially starts on the 1st of August, you will get a special discount where you only pay 10 months, but you're getting 12. So you have the opportunity there to learn not just about the technology bits and pieces, that's the blueprint training, but also to learn about the mindset and the potential traps of an old mindset that may prevent you from implementing that new technology in the right way. So it's a wonderful dual thing. If you want to be really, really good to yourself, then you do both of those trainings, and then you get the best out of both worlds: technology and application on the one side and the right mindset on the other. And I think it's a pretty good offer. It's a pretty comprehensive offer. I can tell you with confidence that nobody else in the world is teaching this right now. Maybe people come out of the woodworks in a few months, but quite honestly, I doubt it. And so this is really something that you will find nowhere else on this planet. And it's leading edge research, and it doesn't cost a lot. And everything is online, so you can watch it from anywhere in the world, from your own living room on a Saturday afternoon with a nice cuppa. That's Australian for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, in case you come from somewhere else. And it's as good as it gets. You can ask questions. It's interactive. There will probably also some opportunity for a live call once in a while to really have some face-to-face interaction. And I hope that is of interest for you, and I may see one or the other of you at those trainings in the future. Would be great. Thanks very much for paying attention. I thought that was a nice interaction here and making some points which weren't just about here's a training, go have it, but also explaining some of the trends in the railway industry, which I think will be the biggest changes that the industry has seen for many, many decades. With that, as I say at the end of my training lessons, get used to it, keep it simple, and bye for now. Hi, this is Doc Frank from the studio. I want to inform you about my latest and greatest training development, and it is all about the mindset of a high capacity railway organization. What I found in my experience of training and consulting is that often you have projects for new technology which seem to be perfectly planned, which are very well executed, and they still don't lead to the success that was expected. And very often the reason for that is mindset. Key stakeholders that have what I call a legacy mindset, an outdated old ways of thinking where the new technology is treated in the same way as the old one, but it's just not suitable to get the most out of the new technology. What I'm offering in this training course, which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset, is that every month there's a new training module with 5 examples of an outdated legacy mindset, the suggestion of a new mindset more suitable for a high capacity railway, and how to get from the old to the new mindset. So those modules will be repeated every month for an entire year. So in total, we are talking about 60 different examples how to get from an old mindset to a more suitable new mindset. And the cost for this is only $10 per example. So this can be paid monthly, this can be paid for a year. And there is an early bird special where until the end of July, you're only paying for 10 months instead of 12. So you get 12, you only pay for 10. And then you have the usual service of an alumni community afterwards where you can ask ongoing questions for at least 12 months after the training. You find more information and you can sign up on my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com/mindset. I hope I see you at this training. It's really leading edge stuff. Nobody else in the world is training on this. And if you really want to explore the ultimate frontier of success in technology projects, then this is the training you need to take. I hope I see you there. And now let's get back to the podcast. Hey, Doc Frank here, host of the Railway Conversations podcast. Thank you for listening.